Joining me live now is the Shadow Treasurer, Angus Taylor. Angus Taylor, thank you for your time. And before we get to the issues around the Treasurer and the Reserve Bank, which I bet you can't wait to talk about, let's start with the nuclear energy issue. I played the Labor attack ad this morning. They say your plan is going to cost $600 billion and will mean all of us pay $1,000 extra a year for our power bills. What do you say to that?
Oh, Labor's got no credibility on this, Andrew. This is the Labor Party that promised $275 price reduction, and there's no sign of that. And of course, we've got costings of their plan after the election, $1.2 trillion, $1.2 trillion. There's no sign of our electricity bills going down under this renewables only strategy of this Labor government. Meanwhile, emissions are going up, Andrew, not down, they're going up. So their energy policies have failed. There is a better pathway, and that is exactly what we're pursuing. And
well, is $600 billion off the mark? Is $600 billion off the mark?
You know, one of the things I love about going on your program, you always want me to announce our policies ahead of time, Andrew, and I'm not going to do it. But what I will say is any cost will be way short of Labor's costings, which is $1.2 trillion. I mean, a renewables only strategy is just so expensive. It is failing Australians right now. The $275 is nowhere near anyone's actual electricity costings or their bills that they're seeing, Andrew. And Labor's approach has failed. Now, they can do what they love to do, which is to act more like an opposition than a government, which is clearly what they're doing with these attack ads. That's where Albanese's happy fighting Tories. But frankly, we're focused on policies that will bring down prices and make sure that we have a reliable grid, not just in the short term, but over the longer term as well.
All right, let me play you what you said about nuclear energy when you were Energy Minister in 2018.
Nuclear is not going to help me in that process. As you know, it's a long way off. I know that sector pretty well. I've worked in it in the past, and it's a long way off actually solving the real problem we've got to face.
That was with Chris Kenny. In 2020, you said the economics of traditional nuclear power stations has typically not worked in recent years. How do you reconcile those sort of statements with you being in favour of this policy today?
Well, we're seeing the technology changing, and we're seeing attitudes towards nuclear changing all around the world. I mean, if you take the UK, for instance, and not long after those interviews, I spent a lot of time with the UK Energy Minister and the UK Emissions Minister, Alex Sharma, and we saw the UK recognising the changes in technologies that are happening and the costings and the potential for nuclear. And I think we've come to a view over time that this can play a role. It's not the only role. We need more gas in our system in the coming years, but it can be part of the mix, and it should be part of the mix. Now, the answer to energy is always a range of technologies, Andrew. It always has been and it always will be. The trouble with Labor is it's a renewables only strategy. And
do you still believe in hydrogen? Because Peter Dutton doesn't.
Well, hydrogen plays a role today. I mean, we use blue hydrogen now from gas for making fertiliser, and every farmer needs fertiliser, so it has a role. But I think what Peter's talking about is green hydrogen as a major part of our grid. We are a long way from that, a long way from that. I can assure you the amount of green hydrogen in the world is way, way, way short of the amount of use of nuclear power. So, nuclear is a proven technology. It does work. We're seeing huge investments in it around the world, and will continue to, I have no doubt, in the coming years.
All right.
Green hydrogen, go on.
Sorry, is it true, even with your plan for nuclear power and 7 government-owned power plants, that it will be, this is what the government claims, only 4% of the energy mix? Do you accept that figure?
Look, you'll see the costings and the detail on this prior to the election. Look, this government has no credibility on energy. You know, Chris Bowen runs around spouting his nonsense on a daily basis, and meanwhile Australians are getting their energy bills and seeing something completely different. Frankly, I just ignore the nonsense they come up with in energy because it has no credibility.
Let's move on to the Reserve Bank and Jim Chalmers. What do you think Jim Chalmers was trying to achieve when he said interest rates have smashed the economy?
Well, he's a desperate treasurer who is trying to blame shift and find excuses for his failures. This is a government that has many, many levers it can use to bring down inflation and interest rates, fiscal policy, industrial relations, immigration policy, energy policy. We've just been talking about red tape and approvals. They've failed on all of those fronts. So now what he's doing is simply shifting blame to others. He's fighting everybody except for his homegrown inflation right now. And we've seen that with the Reserve Bank. We've also seen it fighting the opposition leader, fighting the Productivity Commission, fighting the laws of economics, fighting his old mentor, Paul Keating, Andrew, over superannuation taxes. And he's doing that because his plan, well, there was no plan, but what he's sought to achieve has completely failed.
Okay,
we're seeing that now with...
You say they're spending too much. Given how anaemic the growth is, had Labor spent less, we'd be in recession, wouldn't we?
If Labor had fought inflation first from when they came into government, then we would have seen inflation come down faster and earlier, and the economy would be in a much stronger position to grow now without inflation. It's as simple as that. And they have completely failed to do what they said they were going to do. A little bit like energy policy, Andrew. They promised that they were going to fight the cost of living. They promised that they were going to bring down mortgages. We've seen no such thing. I mean, since January this year, every other advanced country in the world has seen core inflation come down. Not Australia. Not Australia. It's exactly where it was back in January. And we're seeing interest rates coming down in country after country around the world, in Canada, in the UK, in New Zealand, in Europe. We'll see it no doubt soon in the United States. Not Australia. This government has many levers at its disposal.
I will point out Canada has Canada has higher unemployment. What do you think of Michelle Bullock's comments that some people will have to sell their homes and that the Reserve Bank might have to hike interest rates again?
Well, we're seeing the government's failures at work. The Reserve Bank makes its decisions within the context of government policy, and those government policies have completely failed, Andrew, in each of those areas I have already outlined. And the result is that the Reserve Bank is doing what it's doing. And the government now, in complete desperation, a completely desperate treasurer, is just blame shifting. He's looking to find excuses. Now, there is a better pathway. It is going back to basics. It's supply side, good old-fashioned supply side economics where you get the basics right. You approve major projects that are going to strengthen the economy. You make sure your immigration policy is in line with your housing supply. You do make sure that you don't spend money that is not necessary to be spent at a time like this. You make sure your industrial relations policy is driving productivity and supporting both workers and employers to create better, more competitive workplaces. And this is just getting the basics right, Andrew. They've completely failed. Labor doesn't have the toolkit for the times. Labor's answer to everything is just throw money at them.
On tax cuts, you've said you'll return some of the stage 3 tax cuts at the top end. Is that your intention as an election promise, or might the budget situation prevent you from what you're wanting to do there? The key part of this question is the last bit, I think.
Yeah, say the last bit again then.
Is the budget situation, could that potentially prevent you from what you want to do on tax cuts?
Well, we'll see how the budget situation plays out over the next little while. What's very clear is that the government has increased its spending massively, 16% growth in spending in the next 2 years. Already we've seen an increase in spending of $315 billion since Labor came to power, over $30,000 for every household. We do want to see lower simplifier taxes in this country, and it's why we've already announced, Andrew, ramping up accelerated depreciation for small businesses to encourage small business to invest in their businesses, in their workplaces, in their communities, and we'll continue to go down that path. Now, again, you've always got the cheeky attempt to get me to announce policy ahead of time. I'm not going to do that today, but our commitment to lower simplifier taxes has been clear for a long, long time, and that's why we already have announced those important changes for small businesses in the last budget and reply.
Just finally, you've said you'll cut $100 billion over the forward estimates, or indicated that. Half of that's off-budget spending, though, isn't it? The government's going to claim opposition policies would cut more like $315 billion. They'll put winding back spending on urgent care clinics, winding back pay rises given to childcare workers, winding back money the government set aside for increased housing supply on energy bill relief and the like. Are any of them in the mix, and how many public servants might you cut?
Honestly, Andrew, again, this is a government and a Prime Minister and Treasurer who I think would prefer to be in opposition, and that's where we want to put them. They're acting like an opposition in the way they're carrying on. Now, we've opposed over $92 billion of spending through the Parliament, and we've done that at a time like this without cutting or proposing any cuts or opposing any cuts to essential services. We know Australians rely on essential services, but what we're seeing from this government is in investments that they want to make in power lines to nowhere, 28,000 kilometres of transmission lines across some of the most beautiful rural landscapes in the world. And this Labor government wants to just trash those areas and spend billions and billions of dollars of taxpayer money. This is not the kind of investment that is necessary at a time like this. In fact,
Angus
in that
Taylor?
case, we don't think it's the kind of...
Angus Taylor, we're out of time, I'm sorry. Thanks so much for your time.